I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where the Time Lords gave us 3 options, but only one is left. Podcasting. Because this week we watched Genesis of the Daleks.
Written by Terry Nation.
Directed by David Maloney.
And aired from March 8th to April 12th, 1975.
Really over-representing Terry Nation in this, rewatch that we're doing. Really, watching more Terry Nation than any other writer. Just really giving him his credit that he finally deserves.
Yeah, and we didn't do that on purpose, right? We just kind of picked the stories. At least I wasn't. Maybe it was in the back of my mind, but I wasn't, cognizant of the fact that these were both Terry Nation stories at the time. Obviously, I knew. But, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't sit down and go, all right, we need 2 Terry Nation stories, one Jerry Davis and Kit Pedler story.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even remembered them. If we actually sat down and did that, they wouldn't have crossed my mind.
Wow, not remembering the creators of the Cybermen, but remembering the creators of the Daleks. That sounds like discrimination against the Cybermen to me.
Yeah, it's more like not remembering Jerry Davis and Kit Pedler and remembering the guy who created Blake 7.
Yeah, also remembering the guy who, basically burned himself out doing Blake 7 and then, left it to Chris Boucher after that.
Yeah, kind of like how we, on Zenith the Blake 7 podcast, burned ourselves out and then left it to other Blake 7 podcasters.
Yeah, but at least we covered the whole show, Terry Nation had basically just, buggered off by Series D.
Yeah. We went out in a blaze of glory with Zenith, so take that, Terry.
We didn't go out. We're still here.
Yeah, not on Zenith, so I guess that's a good point, but it's not with Zenith. It's a good point with the word good linked to the TARDIS wiki page on good, which exists.
Great. Thanks for working that in somehow so we can link that in the show notes.
Yeah, it's gonna suck in the future when everyone, is viewing the world through AR displays and stuff, and their speech to text and all your words are just hyperlinked to various pages on the internet that just, I don't know. It's gonna suck. It's probably never gonna be a reality.
You never know. I'm just waiting for the day where the TARDIS wiki finally throws in the towel and is you know what? We're done. And just the TARDIS wiki goes down and half of our show notes just break.
Yeah. Fandom.com just shuts down.
Yeah. I guess that's dozens of links and dozens of references we made in the podcast lost to history.
Hundreds,
yeah, probably.
Speaking of history, Genesis of the Daleks is a big part of Doctor Who history. It was rated in 1999 the best Doctor Who story ever by Doctor Who magazine.
Well, to be fair, they hadn't seen Love and Monsters yet at that point, so...
Yeah, I'll give them
they
a
could
pass.
Be forgiven.
Yeah.
They could be forgiven for not getting it right.
Mm-hmm. And they hadn't... Never mind. I was going to go into Fear Her as well, but that's just the same joke repackaged. Kind of like how it was when you actually watched those two back-to-back in real time, week to week, just bad jokes.
Bad writing, bad or ill-defined villains. Weird, very topical references that became dated a week after the episode aired. Just all.
They were already dated. What's his face was really into ELO, if you remember. Right?
Elton.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Elton. I can't believe I remember his name.
It was Elton and what was his girlfriend's name? Ursula or something like
Yeah,
that?
Ursula. Yeah.
There's something weird. Yeah. Oh my god. Why are we talking about Love and Monsters in the Genesis of the Daleks episode?
I don't know.
There's like
You know?
two opposite extremes of quality. Might have sounded like I was making fun of this story for being rated highly, but obviously we also personally rate it very highly because we picked it for this run of stories. And as much as it wasn't as good as I remembered it being, it was still really good.
Yeah, I still think it's really good.
Maybe this is just me, but my memory of this was like, this is just an edge of your seat roller coaster, nonstop, front to back, start to finish, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was mostly just, upon this rewatch, I think it's mostly just a really solid story that really never gets boring. Is maybe just that.
I mean, there's a lot of political intrigue. There's a surprising amount of political intrigue actually going on in this episode. Or serial, I guess I should actually say.
Right.
What
Maybe that's one of its strengths, is that it's less running around corridors and it's more, it's more the intrigue, or at least, even if it's not all that interesting, even if like fantasy politics are not all that interesting, it keeps the goal fresh. They're not just running around corridors for 20 minutes with the same goal that they had, 20 minutes ago or something like that. So.
Yeah. I mean, and what I like about the political intrigue and everything is just like how absolutely serendipitous this entire story is for Davros, because there are like at least dozens of places throughout this entire story where everything could have just gone completely wrong, and somehow it all just works out great for Davros.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to talk about, and something that I'm honestly surprised we didn't, I think, talk about our first watch through of this, which is that Davros is basically powerless, and he has everyone under his thumb. And he's almost...
everybody's just following him blindly, even though he really he's a man in a chair with dozens of vulnerabilities and like no real power except his mind, I guess.
There's literally a button on his version of the travel machine, which is obviously half Dalek already. There's literally a button on that if you press it, he dies. And yet he has everyone under his thumb, and it's really fascinating, actually. He's almost like a cult leader, where it's like, where's their power coming from? Is it just their charisma, or like what,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he even, and just taking that even further, he even, cult leaders often have their, right-hand man or whatever, and Davros 100% does in Niter. It was just like, if Niter turned against him, he would have nothing,
If like literally anybody on the rebellion side had like the most minor faltering of his scruples and just was like, we should just shoot Davros, and just shoots Davros before like this whole democratic plan could happen. Then like, oh no, Davros is dead. Like, what are we gonna do? Like,
yeah, and that's, I wanted to talk about this at the end. I guess we're just doing it now, so whatever. It's like, and that's so fascinating. Like, you go into that scene where the resistance group are like, no, we need a democratic, bloodless revolution. And you go into that scene, they have Davros at gunpoint, and Davros is the one controlling that meeting. He's the one controlling the narrative still.
Yeah.
It's just really well done.
None of them get like itchy trigger fingers. None of them are just like, why don't we just end this right now, and just shoots him. Wild.
That's really why Davros probably has gone down in Doctor Who history, and probably why this appearance of his is, I would say, his best. I would probably need to rewatch all of his stories to really judge now, but I remember this being like Davros at his best, and they never like did Davros justice again. Maybe that has something to do with it, what we were just talking about.
I think in his future appearances, it's it's kind of like he's still helpless and is still completely useless. But he has no like control over anybody in those other stories, so he kind of just comes across as being pathetic.
Yeah, maybe like even with Destiny of the Daleks, it's like, did Terry Nation write Destiny of the Daleks actually? Come to think of it, I think he did.
He wrote pretty much every Dalek story from this moment forward, I think, if I remember correctly, or at least contributed to them in some way.
He did write Destiny of the Daleks. He only writes two after this: The Android Invasion and Destiny of the Daleks, according to the TARDIS wiki here.
Oh yeah, who wrote Remembrance?
I have no idea.
Oh well, whatever.
But yeah, I do remember, like, they never really captured Davros in the same way again. And it might be that he is more helpless.
It doesn't help that they killed him off at the end of the story. At the end of this story, and then they have to, like, retcon that later on, just completely disregarding previously established canon, just completely rewriting previously seen stories to bring back a villain that people liked. You know, who would ever dare do such a thing?
Exactly. They're not respecting the canon and the established facts.
I'm genuinely amazed at how 3 weeks in a row we've watched stories that have retconned previous canon in some way. I mean, first it was Tomb of the Cybermen being like, yeah, Telos was the home planet of the Cybermen, not Mondaz. Last week it was the Daemons just meddling in human history and rewriting the sinking of Atlantis. This week it's not only them rewriting the creation of the Daleks by the same guy who wrote the Daleks, for the record, but then also them in the future retconning the end of this story to bring Davros back to life.
Yeah, and it's so, like, I don't know, I always thought it was silly, but now rewatching all these classic Who episodes that have so many, you know, that have so little regard for the continuity, it's just like, it's so silly that, like, you know, people bring up, like, oh, I didn't like the Timeless Children, and it's like the main reason is that it messes with the canon or something like that. It's like, it's almost ridiculous.
It's really interesting to me, though, because we would never have even noticed all of these, or even pointed out all these changes to canon in these classic stories if that whole outrage hadn't happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, if people had just accepted the Timeless Children and like, yeah, whatever, you know, like, whatever. And a lot of people did. A lot of people were like, yeah, okay, it's whatever.
There's a
then
vocal
we probably
set of
wouldn't even
people
care.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, so the story opens with the Time Lords deciding to, you know, just basically meddle in time again. They call the Doctor over and they're like, hey, we need you to, like, stop the creation of the Daleks. And he's like, but why? And they're like, well, you know, the Daleks suck. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I know, but, like, why? And the Time Lord guy is like, well, you know, one day the Daleks might wipe out all of life. Doctor's like, I mean, I guess. Let me just get my TARDIS. He's like, just kidding. You don't need your TARDIS. You're already on Skaro. Doctor's like, wow.
Did you remember how surreal this intro was? Because I didn't.
No. There were a lot of things I realized I didn't remember about the story, not the least of which is my favorite part, which is the giant clam later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't remember this whole entire 20-minute intro sequence where they, like, the Doctor steps on a landmine, and it's just like, really? I didn't remember that whatsoever.
I think it's great, though. I mean, this whole, like, they're already on Skaro, and now they've got to get from the bombed-out World War I wasteland that they've been dropped in, like, into the Khaled city.
Mm-hmm. Definitely very heavy World War I and II motifs in this story. Leave it to Terry Nation. Terry Nation envisioned the Daleks, if I remember correctly, as, you know, having those parallels with Nazi Germany, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah. I mean, the costume designers in this episode specifically, this serial, just really taking that metaphor, that allegory, and just giving it to the audience with all the subtlety of a brick to the face, with like all the SS motifs on their uniforms and the like iron cross that Nader is wearing around his neck. Like, all right, could you get any more obvious?
Yeah, but it's really interesting because, the Daleks were envisioned that way back in the Daleks in 1963, but it's really this episode that tackles the whole genocide aspect, right? I mean,
this is also the first episode where I think you can really draw parallels between like the Daleks. Like in the Daleks are clearly analogous to Nazism, but there's no like one-to-one correspondence between any person or any belief. And this, I think, is the first time the Daleks are really drawing like a direct one-to-one comparison, where Davros is very much like what was his name? Was it Eichmann, the Nazi scientist who basically or Mengele, one of the two, who like did genetic experiments and human experiments on people in concentration camps.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, the whole, I don't know if I would call it the climax, but it's like one of the parts where the story comes to a head is the Doctor about to touch two wires together and saying, like, do I have the right to commit genocide? Like, it doesn't get more on the nose than that.
I mean, then he also, we talked about this the first time we watched this, where he gives the whole, like, if someone pointed out a baby to you and told you they were going to be a mass murderer, which is, like, directly that thought experiment. It's like, if you went back in time and saw baby Hitler, would you actually, like, be able to kill baby Hitler?
Right. Terry Nation really coming in hard with a, you mother effers didn't get it the first time. For better or worse.
Well, anyway, yeah, so they're going through this minefield, and the Doctor steps on a landmine in, like, the least suspenseful landmine incident in the show, because it's not even the cliffhanger to the episode. It's, like, 10 minutes into the episode, and you're like, there's no way they're going to kill off, like, any of these people 10 minutes into the first episode of a 6-episode serial.
I said that, too. I actually... this is actually a comment that we got on Twitter, which we usually read the comments and emails at the end, but I think it's apt to talk about this here. I mentioned the same thing when I was watching this. I posted on Twitter, forgot about the whole landmine scene, like the way it builds the setting, but there's no tension. Not like they blow the mains to Kingdom Come 10 minutes in. It just comes across as an even dumber version of the classic Who, oh no, is the Doctor gonna die? Cliffhanger. And then Bob Rushy, on Twitter, at Bob Rushy, responded, I don't really get this. Like, we know the Mandalorian won't die in some random episode, but it's still tense just because it'd be a tense situation. And yeah, it's a really good point. So maybe it's some other reason why this doesn't... Because I agree, this isn't a very not tense scene. It's just like a random WTF scene, but maybe it's some other reason for that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how apt the Mandalorian comparison is, because it's not like every episode ends with the Mandalorian potentially dying. I mean, I think the reason this is not tense is not because it's just a like, oh, it's a tense situation. I think it's not tense because they do it every week. You can only do something so many times before it just loses its impact. I mean, I feel like, the Mandalorian would be a lot less tense if every single episode ended with, oh no, like, somebody's got the Mandalorian at gunpoint and he's got no way out of the situation. He might die. Like, can you imagine that for 12 weeks? Like, by episode 14, you'd be like, I don't think he's going to die. Like, it's just been shown to us so many times. And in a way, you could play with that. And, like, then it's even more shocking when he actually does. But the Doctor Who never does that. So...
Yeah, it might be more of, like, also... Like, in Doctor Who, when these things happen, there are no repercussions. So maybe it's not like somebody dies, but it's like, oh no, the Doctor's at gunpoint, and then, they get it advances the story in some way. They get taken to a jail cell or something. But it's like so many instances of it are just like just kidding, within the next, like, 2 seconds of footage, it's just like they undo it somehow, you know? Which is, I mean, maybe this scene isn't, now that I think about it, in line totally, which is like, it revolves more around the characters, right? It's just the Doctor steps on the mine, and then we see Harry kind of taking care of the situation, building out fleshing out, I guess, his character, stuff like that. So, hey, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really permanent repercussions until the Russell T era, you know, until, like, the Ninth Doctor dies and Rose actually has to deal with that. Because, I mean, that's one of the first companions, or one of the most major companions to carry over between Doctors' tenures who actually feels the effect of that. And then when Sarah Jane comes back in school reunion, is like, you dropped me off in the wrong town and then never came to visit me again. Like, what the WTF, Doctor? Like, the Doctor never has to deal with repercussions until the reboot era. And then he gets hit pretty hard. I mean, then with Donna, like, getting her mind erased and him, like, having to, you know, she has to help him without remembering the Doctor in Journey's End. And, like...
Yeah, then Stephen Moffat hit us like a comet.
Well, briefly. Because remember, consequences can be rewritten if they're done well.
One of the most prophetic lines I've ever said in my life.
So the Doctor, Harry, and Sarah Jane get bombed, get attacked. They get caught in the crossfire between some Khalids and some Thals in one of the trenches. Mainly, they fall victim to a gas bomb, which, again, like, direct comparisons to World War One, notwithstanding. Great
sense of, like, the horrors of the trenches. Like, I don't know, this, obviously, Doctor Who in this point in time is not, you know, doing... Actually, I'll take that back. It is doing amazing things with the sets and everything like that, I think, sometimes. And, you know, great show of it here. I don't know. I really got, like, the horror of all of this from the few times we go into the trenches.
Do you think Philip Hinchcliffe got the story again and was like... damn, again, Terry Nation turning in a story that has, like, 6 different locations and requires, like, 10 different sets. Like, damn, Terry, why do you keep doing this to us? Because there's the battlefield, the Khaled city, the Thal, like, detention center, the Thal, like, rocket launch platform, or the Thal rocket launch platform. Like, then, like, even within the Khaled city, there's the, like, science room, there's the incubation room. It's like, there are a lot of sets in this story.
There are. It must have just been, like, you know, turned in the script and they were like, really? Like you just said. But at the same time, it keeps things fresh for us. Not to mention, we actually forgot to mention this, Terry Nation, again, test running the Blake 7 teleport bracelet. You know, coming in 12 years later, and he has a teleport bracelet in this story as well. 12 years after Keys of Marinus, that is. And 3 before Blake 7.
Yeah, he does a lot of proto-Blake 7 things in this. I mentioned before we started recording that there was a moment where I really thought he was going to, like, Davros was going to say seek, locate, destroy. But he says the same thing in different words because he just goes, find them and exterminate them. So...
Mm-hmm. Well, the Doctor and Harry get taken in. Sarah is left behind.
Right.
And this is when we're first introduced to the Khalids, I think, in the entire show.
Yeah, I mean, we've only ever met the Khalids as the Daleks in the Daleks. That's the only time that the Daleks are ever identified as being former Khalids.
There was something in this story that I remembered, or there's something that I remembered being in this story that wasn't, which is that I remember there being a whole thing about how the older generations, like their war was so brutal and so there was so much loss of life that, like, the older generations had just died out, and that's why, like, you see all the commanders and stuff are, like, young. I remembered that being in this story, but it wasn't. It might have just been in another Doctor Who story.
Might have been in another story. You might have been, like, mixing it up with the the war has been going on so long that they're fighting with bows and arrows because they're out of other weapons. Mm-hmm. Which they actually mentioned. Harry and Sarah mentioned this when they get into the trench, because everybody's wearing like animal hides but carrying guns and bows and arrow, and they're like, this is so confusing. There's like 6 different eras of warfare being combined in this one trench.
Mm-hmm. And they do mention that it's been like a generations-long war, like thousands of years, probably.
Yeah, can't imagine that the like people currently fighting the war actually remember like what started the war.
Yeah.
Which is like someone stole someone else's sandwich or something. Like,
yeah, it just escalated.
Basically, the Doctor and Harry get taken into the Khaled Dome. Sarah gets, wanders out. Sarah makes this like questionable, I think somewhat questionable, just from a like what Occam's razor standpoint, where she's like, I wonder where the Doctor and Harry went. Instead of like checking this door right behind where I'm standing, I'm gonna wander out into the wasteland, like go see where they went.
Yeah, it is kind of funny when you put it that way.
But then I think the end of episode 1 is when Davros is introduced, but we don't actually like really get a good look at him. He's kind of in shadows and just is kind of barking commands at Nada.
Yeah, Sarah comes across him just like out and about somewhere.
She like stumbles into his secret lair. Like, what?
We never see it again, I don't think.
Yeah, not that I can remember.
Yeah. And then you see a Dalek, actually. I believe that's the real sort of cliffhanger, is that you see them. I guess they're like test running Daleks or something out in the wasteland.
Yeah, the Doctor also kind of makes a comment about how, Khaled, that's an anagram of, and then he doesn't finish the sentence. But, the audience at home is like, I see. It's also a really, like, it's not like a subtle anagram. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah, it's just a couple letters switched around. That's an anagram of Dleek. Or Cleed, I don't know. Elcad.
That's an anagram of Khalid.
It's not even an anagram, it's just a different pronunciation. God, Time Flight was after this, but it's just, imagine if that was the case.
Yeah, imagine if it was the other way around and Time Flight was first, and the Doctor was like, that's an... I don't even think it's actually an anagram of Khalid, but imagine if the Doctor was just completely wrong and he's like, that's an anagram of Khalid, wonder what that means.
Imagine that's an anagram of Cyberman.
Just something completely wrong. That's an anagram of peanut butter toast. What does it mean, Harry? Anyway, into episode 2.
Sarah gets captured at the beginning of episode 2. She's taken by some mutos.
Yeah, so I think...
Another concept Terry Nation would reuse with the mutoids. Not really, but...
I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
I think we've actually heard about the mutos before this. I think maybe it was Nada. Someone mentions them because they say that the Doctor and Harry don't look like mutos, even though they found them in the wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
So they get taken basically to the science division. They're going to be thrown. Well, Nader tries to interrogate them briefly, but then once they empty his pockets and discover that his pockets are filled with scientific wonders of lands, far away, the science division.
Yeah, knives and lint.
Yeah, knives, lint, and the sonic screwdriver. They get taken to Garmin, I believe.
No, I think this is
Or
Ronson.
Ronson, I
Garmin
don't
is
know.
the revolutionary leader. Yeah, Ronson is the guy who is first on their side, but then gets killed. Because he's not doing much to divert suspicion from himself. He's eyeing Niter like out of the corner of his eye and just acting real suspicious. But he's the first one that the Doctor and Harry meet who is not on board with the Dalek project.
Yeah, because we see a demonstration of the Daleks now. Davros brings them in, and they basically hone in on the Doctor and Harry and like must exterminate. And Ronson's like, whoa, these guys are from the future, man. We could use that, you know what I'm saying? And Davros is really upset because he's like, my creatures showed a natural inclination to kill, and you stopped them, Ronson.
Yeah, maybe it was because you removed all their emotions. Natural inclination to kill. Come on.
I like later on when like they're all begging for empathy from the Daleks, and they're like, "We do not know what empathy is," and like Davros is over in the corner, like, "Oh shoot, oh shoot, oh shoot."
Maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
But anyway, meanwhile, Sarah is bumming around with the Mutos, having a grand old time, just like in the wasteland. She meets the clan, but only briefly, because she then gets captured by the Thals.
Mm-hmm. The Thals were interesting because while earlier stories, namely the Daleks, portrayed, this very easy to understand dichotomy of like, all right, Daleks are bad, Thals are good, let's go. This one paints the Thals in almost an equally bad light. It's just that you see more of the Khalids in the Dalek Society and obviously Davros. So, the Khalids / Daleks are still and Davros's faction are still the villains here, but it's like the Thals are doing some pretty messed up stuff too.
Yeah, the Thals are also like not engaging in like genetic modification to create a super race of murderous serial killing beings.
Yeah, that's true.
Their plan is a lot more like Saturday morning cartoon, to borrow a phrase that you used in the Daemons, because their plan is just like build a really big rocket that's going to blow up the Khaled city.
How they're doing it though is brutal, and we actually see that, right? They're basically using slave labor from the Mutos, who we didn't explicitly mention, but are obviously people who have been affected by the nuclear war and the radioactive, fallout.
Yeah. Episode 2 is a lot more Sarah Jane focused than Doctor and Harry. She tries to start basically an insurrection within the Muto camp inside the Fall City, because they're using what is the word they use? It's such a Terry Nation. It's such a Terry Nation name. It's like Destroyatron radiation or something.
I don't remember.
Oh, distronic explosives. That's what it was. That'll give you distronic toxemia if you are like around it without shielding, which, the Thals are kind of desperate, and also they have they have no resources. They're trying to make the rocket as destructive as possible, so they're not using shielding.
Right. Also, all the Mutos who are working on the rocket are basically set to die because they're not even going to take the time and effort to, I guess, have them come out of the launch area or the silo or whatever when they launch. They're just going to get burned.
Yeah.
Alive. So they have a limited amount of time to escape, and Sarah Jane is really the only one who, has the alacrity and the drive, I guess, to spur escape and revolution here.
Right.
You might even call this a Sarah Jane adventure.
Wow. Anyway, episode 2 ends with a cliffhanger of her like falling off the scaffolding.
Yeah, I totally forgot how absolutely brutal and ruthless this scene is. I mean, it's frightening. It's like they're climbing up this scaffolding, Sarah Jane and all the Mutos, and there are actually also some Khalid prisoners in the mix. They're climbing up, and the Thals are just shooting at them, picking them off one by one. They're just dropping.
Yeah, like flies.
Yeah. It's like, man, I totally forgot how brutal it was depicted.
But she gets out of it by just like not falling.
Yeah.
In the next episode, she just kind of lands like on the next, scaffold down.
Mm-hmm. There was one Muto with a character and probably a name too, and he kind of he encourages her, even though I guess not even though, but it's sort of a reciprocal thing, right? She encouraged him to escape, and then he's like, no, like, we got to go through with this type thing. So they keep climbing.
And they don't make it out, actually.
Yeah, they make it to the top, but they get captured.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how they get captured at the top, but they do.
There's just like some guys waiting at the top or something like that. Or there's like Sarah. It's weird because Sarah doesn't want to make this like very small jump or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that, yeah.
Yeah. But meanwhile, back in the Khaled dome, Niter is heavily onto Ronson at this point.
Again, not that Ronson is doing anything to to hide his involvement.
No, I mean, you see him. He's seen talking with the doctor and Harry and everything, and just, yeah, he's not doing much to hide his doubts.
But he basically decides that it's his best course of action here is to help Harry and the Doctor escape, so that they can take some evidence to the kind of Khaled high command about Davros's indiscretions and genetic experiments.
Yeah, so he does that. There's an entire... I forgot this, but basically what we're seeing is, like you mentioned before, sort of the science division. There's another Khaled dome in this story that I guess is a more... their, where they hold their political, or where their seat of government is or whatever, and then there's probably residential areas as well. Well, those get blown to smithereens later on, but yeah, the Doctor and Harry have this audience with the council, which we never see, I believe.
No, we just kind of, it's kind of funny how this is done, because we kind of just like, it cuts back to Davros and Nida, and Nida's like, hey, the Doctor and Harry like successfully made it to the High Command and gave them evidence.
Yeah.
And Davros is like, well, shoot, that's pretty bad, isn't it? Nida's like, yeah, that's pretty bad, Davros. Like, what's your plan, man? He's like, don't worry, I got this.
Niter was, in a way, more infuriating than Davros in this episode. Because like we mentioned before, like, Davros is almost nothing without Niter, and yet Niter is so subservient to him, and maybe he doesn't even realize, It's just like, man, you watch this episode, and at least I did. Maybe not everyone is like this, but it's like, you're like, man, come on, Niter, just like turn against him. Like, he would have nothing. Like...
Yeah, but he doesn't want to do that.
No, he doesn't. You can tell from minute one that Niter is like more loyal to Davros than he's ever been loyal to anything else, like, ever. And it's like he even uses that later on as a ploy of like, when he gets captured, he's like, Davros is unhinged and he needs to be stopped, and that's what I'm doing. And it's like, yeah, right.
I don't believe you. Yeah, so at this point, the Doctor and Harry get sent out of the city, and they kind of make because they request to go search the Thal dome for Sarah, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So they send them out. They give them directions to the Thal dome. I think this is where we actually meet the clam again.
Yeah.
I want a story about this
It's not-
clam.
Yeah, get on it, Big Finish. It's not really like, where was this? Like, was it? It looked like they were in some sort of subterranean cavern.
Yeah, I think it
But
was
I don't
just.
know. Maybe it was just a bombed out wasteland of no man's land between the domes or whatever.
I think it was. I think it was like a subterranean cavern, but I think it was also between the domes.
Mm-hmm. It's so random and just so weird that it's like
And so hilarious.
they're obviously. I mean, we were alerted before to the fact that there were like ravenous beasts roaming the wastes, feasting on human flesh. But you imagine, I don't know, packs of wolves or something, not like a giant clam.
Yeah, we've heard at this point that Davros has been doing genetic experiments for years, basically, at this point. And basically the mutos, I think it's actually been explained that the mutos are partially the results of Davros's genetic experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the Doctor and Harry escape the giant clam, luckily. But don't worry.
Harry just dies.
Harry just gets eaten by a giant clam. Can you imagine that being the way that, as a Doctor Who companion, you go out, just eaten by a giant clam, like in the wastelands of Skaro?
That would be one of those things that they don't even touch on it either. It's just like a one-off line of like, I regret to inform you, Sarah, that Harry is dead, eaten by a giant clam. Kind of like how last week on the Daemons, the Doctor's just like, you saved the day, Joe. And she's like, you did? He's like, yep. And that's the end of that.
Davros goes over to the Thal city and is like, hey, guess what? I'm only here for peace. And here's how you can, like, destroy the dome surrounding the Khaled city. And, like, I don't know why everybody in this room wasn't like, BS, you're only here for peace, Davros.
I think they just wanted to put an end to the war.
They're out here believing that, like, the Khaled's most famous, most brutal scientist just wants peace.
Mm-hmm. There is something in this story that, again, maybe later Davros stories don't pick up on, which is that, like, he wasn't always like this. He obviously went mad from power and just, descended into what we see here over time, right? Because there is that scene later on where he asks that guy, like, really, you're going to turn against me? I made the machine in your heart that keeps it beating. Like, there was obviously a time when Davros was doing good.
Yeah, there was obviously a time when Davros was actually a respected scientist, and that's why he has so much power in this society.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe that's sort of something that later Davros stories don't have in them, which is maybe why this one is more fascinating. Yeah, I would use that word, and he's a fascinating character here.
In a way, though, like, the later Dalek stories would have difficulty portraying that aspect of Davros anyway. Since, I don't think we really actually ever get a Dalek story set on Skaro again to tell the reboot, maybe even. And so, without that society to construct Davros with reference to, it's difficult to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is completely removed from society in later stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Or rather, the story itself is just devoid of anything we see here, like building the two societies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the Doctor and Harry are like, well, we should probably make our way back to the Khaleds and maybe warn them, maybe warn the resistance movement that Davros sold them out.
Yeah.
only for them to get captured in the attempt.
Yeah, and then I don't exactly remember how they get here, but they end up helping Sarah. And they, don't they attempt the same escape method? They're trying to climb up that thing, and the doctor just gets zapped. Maybe I'm just making that up.
No, yeah, that is the cliffhanger to episode 3 is the doctor getting zapped.
Right. They get captured. They get brought to the labor camp / rocket construction area, and that's when they meet Sarah, and then the doctor gets zapped. That's what happens.
Right. Yes. So, episode 4, the doctor and Harry are able to escape with Sarah. Meanwhile, in the Khaled city, they're watching the dome dissolve, and they're like, "Damn, the Thals must have figured out how to dissolve our dome." And Davros is over there like, "Yeah, damn, those Thal scientists really must have figured it out on their own."
Doesn't he say someone's like, there must be a traitor in our midst. There's no way they would have been able to do this without that being the case. And then Davros is like, I bet it was Ronson.
Yeah, that's actually what happens. He's like, I bet it was Ronson, guys. And they're like, yeah, that would make sense.
So Ronson gets killed here, I think.
Yeah, Ronson gets sold out by Davros. So yeah, they kill him. Whoops. The doctor and Harry are escaping, through the wasteland again. They run into the Mutos, and my favorite character once again, Clam Dalek. I have a note here that says, I like to imagine that the oysters were like the Daleks V1, and Davros just, didn't know what to do with them. He's like, damn, this is not what I expected when I started gene editing. So just dumped it in the wasteland.
I mean, that would make sense because the Daleks were, as Garmin says later on, the Daleks were created to be casings and travel machines to account for the inevitable mutation and nuclear effects that the Khalids are obviously going through. And so they need to be mobile, obviously. So, if this first one just came out as, a clam, they can't move. It's like, well, we can't use this. So
what I really want to know about the clam, what really, baffles me is I really want to know if Terry Nation wrote into the script we see genetic experiments and one of them looks like a giant clam, or was the set designer sitting there what would be crazy? We have this giant clam from this other show. What if we use that? Whose idea was it?
Well, the script for this was released, if I remember correctly. There was an official script release for this. Yeah, I'm looking here on the wiki. Script release. The script's Tom Baker 1974/5. I wonder what that is. If the page would ever load. All right, the script's Tom Baker 1974/5 offered a detailed look at Tom Baker's first season in the form of extensively annotated scripts of those stories. So that's released. It was released by BBC Books in October of 2001. So if we could get our hands on that, we could probably find out.
True. Unless it's one of those script releases that they edited the script to match the screen story later on.
Yeah, which in that case you just check the Chakotea site, which is just a transcript of the episode, so that wouldn't be contained in that.
Anyway, so what's his name? Garmin is trying to build a resistance movement now that Ronson is dead. And Nida just shows up and is like, yeah, I want to join the movement. Who else do you have? And Garmin just sells out like everybody else in the movement. And then Nida's like, thanks, man. I didn't actually want to join, so thanks. Garmin's like, damn it.
Yeah, Garmin is like the most gullible, I don't know, pure-hearted. It doesn't even cross his mind that, Nider might be lying. And later on, too, he's like, we need to lead a bloodless, democratic revolution. It's like, yeah, you're up against Davros. See where that gets you, man.
So, the Doctor and co get captured, and they find out that the Doctor's from the future. So, Davros is like, I'm going to torture Harry and Sarah till you tell me every Dalek defeat ever.
Yeah, meanwhile, this is all going on while the Daleks are going on a killing spree in the Thal Dome. We should probably mention that, because there's another resistance group forming led by, I believe, Thals and Mutos.
Right.
So they're not actually that important. They come into play later on, but yeah. But then like you said, Davros wants to know the reason for every Dalek defeat. For some reason, it's been in my mind for 6 years, like this line, you will tell me the reason for every Dalek defeat. That's like one of the most memorable lines from Doctor Who as a whole, to me, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting, too, because, this story just hits these points that most classic Doctor Who stories don't, and it's really more interesting for it, which is like, they're actually using the time travel for something more interesting than, well, that's how we got here, And so few classic Doctor Who stories did that. Now, you can argue that when they really started incorporating the time travel in the reboot, they went overboard with it, but as opposed to the, nothing that most classic Doctor Who stories are really in the time travel regard, this is at least, a little more interesting, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, this is also the first time that being a time traveler has ever served as a detriment to the Doctor, rather than than either being just completely a non-factor in the story or being a positive. A lot of the times, the fact that the Doctor's from the future, he'll be like, yes, I know how this plays out, or he uses information from the future to leverage his situation, whereas in this one, it's the fact that he's from the future is directly the reason why he's been captured and why Harry and Sarah are being tortured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He gives in. He tells him the reason for every Dalek defeat.
Yeah. Including some that we've never seen on screen, like an invasion of Mars and Venus for some reason. Why are they invading Venus?
To master Venusian Aikido, maybe?
Damn, that third Doctor was too good.
Yeah, that would be a Dalek plan of they plan to master Venusian Aikido to one-up the Doctor and then realize that they don't have humanoid bodies.
Damn it. At this point, I kind of started to wonder, Harry and Sarah haven't ever met the Daleks before, have they? Sarah, maybe, but Harry hasn't, right?
Harry hasn't. Did Sarah? I can't remember.
I kind of feel like she hadn't.
Hold on, let me go to a list of Doctor Who television stories for a second. Sarah Jane was first introduced with series or season,
oh yeah,
rather,
she met him with the third Doctor in Death to the Daleks. Yeah.
God, I don't remember Death to the Daleks whatsoever.
It's the one with the Exelons and the building that had the maze to get into.
It's not ringing the bell.
They chased the Doctor into the city. They had all these puzzles they had to solve. I remember it being really wild.
I do not remember that whatsoever, but okay.
Just go to the TARDIS wiki page. That thumbnail image should ring a bell, even though it's the most confusing image I've ever seen.
Yeah, I know. It is. Yeah, it is the most confusing image. I'm looking at it right now. It's not bringing to the surface any memories long submerged.
Yeah, there was some nonsense reason they had to get into the city. That was there was some MacGuffin inside the city that the Exelons, the Daleks, and the Doctor all wanted. Oh man, there's a Jill Tarrant in this story too. Nice going, Terry Nation. Nice.
Man, I'm just going through this page, Death to the Daleks on the TARDIS wiki, and it's just just reliving this story through the images that they chose to use must be what it's like being a non-Doctor Who fan and having overhearing discussion perhaps about Doctor Who. Like, there's a Dalek that's on fire. There's, like, Daleks inspecting some hieroglyphs. Like, it's just wild.
Well, anyway, so Sarah's seen the Daleks before, but Harry hasn't, and he's still just like, don't do it, Doctor. You can't tell them about the future. I mean, for all Harry knows, the Daleks are like Space Santa, giving people gifts for the next 10 centuries.
Yeah, Harry and Sarah do the classic, like, no, don't do it, Doctor. Just, it's okay. We'll be fine. Like, yeah, really, if I was in that situation, I'd be like, you better goddamn tell them every Dalek defeat.
Well, also, like, I mean, yes, but their delivery is also, like, exactly how you did it. Like, oh, no, Doctor, like, don't tell them. Like, I'm gonna die if you don't tell them, but don't tell them.
They were just being sarcastic. Yeah. Great time to choose sarcasm on your potential deathbed.
Imagine the Doctor just is like, all right, and I just won't tell them, and they just like Harry dies, and Sarah's like, what the hell, man? Like, and he's like, you told me not to tell him.
The Doctor's like, you know what? You're right. The entire like future of so many species isn't worth trading 2 lives for.
Anyway, they stop the session for the day. I don't think, when they stop, the Doctor has actually gone through every Dalek defeat at that point, because Davros is like, okay, that's enough for today's session. We'll be back at it again later.
Yeah, there's like too many. Davros is like tallying them up. He's like, oh my god, these things suck. Like, I'm going to need to make some serious tweaks. There's a really funny video on YouTube. It's probably like 5 or 6 years old at this point. It's called Genesis of the Remembrance, and it makes fun of this scene where the Doctor just gives the reasons for all the Dalek defeats, and they're really humorous, and it's just like, and then the Daleks were stopped by a flight of stairs or something like that, and it's pretty funny. I'll link it in the show notes.
I'm imagining a timeline where like the Doctor's telling him about all the defeats, and this is what convinces Davros to go, you know what, you're right, it's actually not worth it. And then the Doctor just leaves, and he's like, that was easy. Anyway, Garmin then says like the most unintentionally hilarious line in the entire story, where he says, our support is growing. We've got nearly 8% of the population. I'm like, 8%? Wow. Shocking. That's like, what, 8 people at this point?
Yeah, the population, like, they talk about this revolution in terms of numbers and percentages, as like you just said, but it's like, when you remember that the entire civilian population of the college has been wiped out, it's pretty much just everyone who worked in the dome that they're in, which is like the science dome or whatever, so it's probably not that, there probably aren't that many of them left total.
Yeah, I mean, we basically see the entire population of the college right there on screen after that rocket hits and destroys the entire civilian population.
So I think into episode 5, the Doctor is about to be freed. Not freed, but he's about to be taken away so they can, do their next session at a later time. And he manages to get a hold of Davros's one good hand, his right hand. And he starts threatening him. And this is when we learn about that there's literally a button on Davros's travel machine that if you press it, he dies. It turns off his life support system, and he dies within 30 seconds, they say.
Yeah, kind of wonder why he included, a switch on his wheelchair that he built that just turns everything off. Like, what was you thinking, man?
Maybe it's like if he ever wanted a way out, if he ever like wanted to, I don't know what you would call it. Like, what would you call like a mercy killing, but it's like a mercy suicide or something? Like if he was ever in a bind, he would just be like, I'm going out on my own terms.
He just flipped the switch. Mm-hmm. I mean, he also, it's later revealed, built like a self-destruct button for the entire building. That's a big red button on the table that says total destruction. And then for some foolish reason, he tries to use this as leverage. Like,
Was
what?
it total destruction of the dome, or was it like total destruction of? Yeah, what? I guess it was. I don't know. I can't.
I mean,
remember.
that was everybody who was left in the Khalid race was in that dome. So,
Oh, it was. It would blow up everything outside their little bunker. Another World War II, parallel there with the Führer bunker and stuff. Like, because they were in the scene at the end where they're deliberating was in Davros's little bunker. So that button would blow up everything outside that, if I remember correctly.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, same here. And that's why I'm just going to go with it, even if it was completely wrong.
Anyway, this is when the Doctor has his famous quote, because he finds some explosives and he's like, I'm going to rig the incubation chamber to blow. And Sarah's like, can you do that? The Doctor goes, the Time Lord gave me 3 options and only one is left. Genocide.
Yeah. That line, for some reason, stuck with us. I don't think it's really, within the Doctor Who fandom, I don't think it's really one that people hone in on, but it certainly has been for us.
It's such a hilarious line, though.
This entire sequence is actually, like, really just odd and funny when you think about it. It's like the Doctor and Harry and Sarah are not being paid attention to at this point. They're out. They escaped. I don't remember how. But they just come across this, like, broom closet filled with explosives. And they're like, sweet, we can use these.
Well, the cliffhanger to episode 5 is the Doctor coming out of the incubation chamber being attacked by, like, I don't know, a child Dalek,
yeah, like
mutant.
Yeah, it's like one of the mutated Khalids.
But it's also, like, it's clearly just Tom Baker, like, struggling back and forth with, like, paper mache, rubber monster.
That's actually an interesting thing is, like, nowadays we think of, the Daleks are the entire thing and the Khalid is the organic being inside, right? Whereas this story doesn't really have that. It's more just that, like, the Khalids became the Daleks. There's not that duality to it.
Yeah, even though that they mention that, like, the travel machines were designed to hold the Dalek, the future mutated forms of the Khalids, they do call the, like, inhabitants of the Dalek casing the Daleks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Meanwhile, Garmin's revolution is going perfect, exactly as bloodless as he would have hoped. Like, literally the first scene where you see them doing anything revolutionary just devolves into, like, a brutal fight, and people get killed.
Well, Davros basically counters their offer with, like, okay, sure, I'll agree to your terms, but only if we first take a democratic vote in front of the, like, remaining council members.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, this is the scene we were talking about before, where it's like they barge into Davros's bunker, guns at the ready. They have him at gunpoint, and he's in control of the narrative somehow.
But, again, like, would have really sucked for Davros if just one guy was like, why are we even doing this? You know what? Screw it. And just shot Davros. Like, whoops. Guess Davros is dead.
Yeah.
There's also now, like, in episode 6, the Doctor's holding the 2 wires. And it's like, all I have to do is touch these 2 wires. And Sarah's, like, really trying to convince him to do it. And part of the scene I thought was really well done, because earlier in the serial, when the Doctor was talking with Davros and he was trying to draw this comparison, like, if you had created a bacteria or, like, a bioweapon that just killed without mercy, would you still release it? Basically just the Daleks, but as like a bacteria or a virus. And he's like, yeah, I think I would. And now Sarah's like, if this was a bacteria or a plague, you would just destroy it right now. So like, why are you hesitating? And the Doctor's like, but I don't know if I have the right. Again, another really funny way that this could have gone sideways for Davros is if Sarah was just like, oh, well, screw this, and grabbed the wires out of the Doctor's hand and just, like, slammed them together. Like,
yeah, she is being really weirdly forceful about doing this. I mean, I didn't pick up on that the first time through, but it's like, man, she is really trying to convince him to do it.
I kind of did think, like, for a hot second that she was just going to grab the wires and be like, screw this, and below the Daleks, the kingdom come.
What actually happens is that Garmin shows up and he's like, we've basically won, Doctor. And he's like, oh, good. So he just puts the wires away. That scene you were talking...
except that turns out to be too wrong. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually going to take us backwards. I probably shouldn't, but it's like... The scene you were talking about before is actually really funny, too. If the Doctor's like... If there was like a... If you could hold, like, the power to destroy everyone in the palm of your hand as a bacteria that would wipe everyone out, would you do it? And Davros is like, yes, I would, in fact. I would!
Yeah, he has this whole thing about how that power would put him above God, to have the virus in a tiny glass vial in his hand that all he would have to do is crush his fingers together and wipe out all of life. To have that kind of power, and the Doctor's like, damn, made the wrong play here with this metaphor.
I know, he's so obviously wanting him to be like, you know what, no, and then he would make this parallel of like, well, that's what you're doing here, but he's just like, yes, I would do that. But yeah, then they kind of the Doctor ends up putting the wires away because Garmin shows up, thinking they'd won for some
godforsaken reason. Because they go to this meeting and then Davros doesn't even make like a convincing argument for why they should believe him. He just goes like, well, if you don't believe me, you can just hit this button and blow everything up and the Daleks will be done and everyone gets like cold feet because I don't know, but apparently Davros is the only member of this entire species who's willing to kill left.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those other World War II parallels, right, where Davros is obviously willing to go the extent and the lengths and commit the atrocities that the Nazis committed, yet everyone else, including the Doctor and all the people in Garmin's faction, when presented with the option to wipe out the Daleks, is just like, nah. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a little on the nose, but who knows, I guess.
Wow. Normally I'm the one making that reference.
Meanwhile, the Doctor, Harry, and Sarah realize that the travel bracelets are gone, so they need to go find them.
Or the travel bracelet, because for some reason the Time Lord only gave them one.
Oh, right.
Seems like an oversight, but okay.
I think they weren't called travel bracelets. They were called... There was a term for them. It was like time rings or something like that. Time ring. I keep thinking it's more than one. I think it was...
it's the time ring.
Yeah, time ring. Then they notice Niter sneaking off, so they're like, they decide to go head him off. And they tell him, I believe that they now tell him that, like, they need to find the time ring and destroy the recording that Davros took of why all the Daleks, of every Dalek defeat, basically. Which both of those things are in Davros's little office, so Niter takes them there. And I forget what happens then. He escapes.
He tries to pretend that Davros opens the safe, and the Doctor's like, dude, the safe is like 5 feet off the ground, and Davros is in a chair with one arm. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, Niter's not the brightest bulb in the pack. It's not a real metaphor, but it is now, I guess. I believe they destroy the reel. And then realize that the time ring had been dropped or something like that. Or they get the time ring. Later on, the Doctor realizes he dropped it. Or I think
Yeah. Because we see a shot of them dropping it in the corridor, and then 5 minutes later, the doctor's like, "Oh shoot, we dropped the time ring in the corridor."
Wow. I didn't know we actually saw a shot of it. I guess I missed that.
Yeah, there's a shot of it like spinning around in the corridor. Classic. Anyway, the resistance group is like, okay, we're gonna blow up the we're gonna blow everything up, and they're like, no, you got to wait for the doctor to get out. And the doctor gets out, and they're like watching on this TV screen as like the Daleks just go, all right, activate production. And Davros is like, I didn't order you to do that. And the Daleks are like, we don't take orders anymore. And Davros is like, no, you got to take orders from me. And they're like, lol, no. Like, what are you going to do? You're an old man in a wheelchair with one arm and no gun, and we've got, like, vaporization rays. Like, what's your plan here, Davros?
Yeah, this is when Davros really starts sweating bullets, like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have removed their emotions. Because he's like, show mercy, please. And they're like, mercy? That word does not exist in our memory banks. Davros is like, oh god, oh no, this was a mistake. That's another thing, too, is like, bringing Davros back almost undermines this. Like, his demise was his hubris in thinking that creating these ruthless killing machines was a good idea and would help his race survive when it actually wipes them out. And yet bringing him back, yeah, almost undermines it in a way.
I mean, I think bringing Davros back is like a mistake. I don't think he was ever used as effectively as he was here, basically ever again. I mean, I get why they brought him back. He became super popular, like the Daleks. Mm-hmm. But the poetic justice of him getting killed by his own creations at the end, and like his own hubris, undoing that is from a storytelling point of view is just like such a mistake, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the curse of like a villain that proves popular or something like that, or any character even.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of happens with the Master too, but the Master, they can kind of get away with it because they can just, create a different incarnation, and that, and this was actually going back to the Timeless Children arc. Like, some people were upset that, like, the Master being evil again undid, like, Missy's character development, but I don't think it does, because it is explicitly, like, a different incarnation of the Master, and we've seen the Doctor very wildly in personality from incarnation to incarnation, so I think the Master is less susceptible to this than a lot of other recurring Doctor Who villains.
I think so too. The Master has never been taken out of his original context, which is that he/she was just a character who rivaled the Doctor and was really unhinged and would do anything to stop the Doctor. That's been consistent since Delgado. Like, with Davros and with a lot of other villains, and this is actually true beyond just Doctor Who and just in sequels in general, or, shows or movies or whatever that bring characters back, is like, those characters were in a context when you first saw them, like Davros is. And when you remove them from that, it just doesn't work,
Yeah, Davros is so, like, specifically created to be in this story. Mm-hmm. And, like, really, Remembrance is, I seem to remember, the only one that does something even interesting with Davros, because in that one he's like basically just a slave to the Daleks. In like the Dalek Mavellan one,
Destiny,
which is
yep.
Destiny, he's still got he's like regained control over the Daleks, which is just like, okay, whatever. And like Remembrance, it seems to me to be the only one that even does anything interesting with Davros after that in the classic show, excluding the reboot. And makes him a slave to the Daleks, who's basically got, like, no choice but to, like, keep helping them create world-ending devices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that's not the end of the story. I thought for sure that it was going to end when you zoom in on the Dalek and it says something, I forget what. But no, they have to have an obligatory goodbye scene. So basically, first of all, the resistance group formed by the Thals and the Mutos blows up portions of the Dalek force. The Doctor makes it out just in time, and they then have a little goodbye scene, which seems obligatory for the classic show. They have to say goodbye every time. And then you see the Doctor, because the TARDIS isn't in this, we should, say explicitly. Probably one of the few classic Who episodes, or just episodes in general, that does not feature the TARDIS, where...
I think the TARDIS wiki mentions that it doesn't happen again till midnight.
Oh my god, wow. 30 years. 30 years, basically. 35-ish. But yeah, you see them kind of playing Ring Around the Rosie in space, and the Doctor says that something good will come of this. He's sure.
Yeah, I mean, he does blow up the incubation chamber at the end of the day, and then basically says, probably didn't destroy them, just set them back 1,000 years.
Yeah, and that's that. That's Genesis of the Daleks.
Yep. Very enjoyable story, to me anyway. I think it was a good time.
I would say so too. It had more going on, I think, than most classic Who stories. Just with all the twists and turns in the plot, A lot of classic Who stories, I feel, we came away from saying were boring because they were a little too straightforward. Very few, again, just twists, I guess. This one kept it interesting the whole time, I would say.
Yeah, it also kind of does the, the thing that we mentioned in Keys of Marinus, where it doesn't stay static, it doesn't sit around in one location for too long, and also has all these other subplots going on, in kind of individual episode plots almost. Sarah with the with the Thal city trying to escape the Thal city, and then the trying to cross the wasteland, and then the citizen review panel and democracy trying to stop Davros. There's a lot going on here outside of the Doctor's involvement in the story. A lot of Doctor Who stories fall into the trap of the only plot in the story has to revolve around the Doctor, and that's the only story that's allowed to be shown on screen. Whereas this story doesn't do that, and I think that's part of the reason why it's good, because it feels like there's a universe outside of just the Doctor. It feels like he's been dropped into something rather than something just kind of spontaneously coming into existence when he arrived.
Yeah, I mean, say what you will about Terry Nation. Terry Nation gets a lot of flack for the Mutos, or what were they from Blake's, the Phibians from Blake 7, of really that's the best you could come up with. But he is at his best, he's pretty great at creating these sort of sci-fi societies and worlds that are obviously heavily based on real life, as they should be, but that feel fleshed out and kind of more in depth. I mean, heck, we talked about this with Keys of Marinus. Marinus is one of the most fully fleshed out and realized planets ever in Doctor Who. And you have that same feeling and same vibe with this story, it's a fully fleshed out world and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Terry Nation is really good at, making non-monoculture planets. I mean, even in this story, with the Khalids and the Thals, sure, it's only two factions, but that's even more effort than most Doctor Who stories would put into developing a planet and a society. There's a whole story here between these two factions.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I do think that we probably picked one of the better Fourth Doctor stories to cover for this recap.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm glad we picked this.
I mean, never mind.
I didn't have anything else to say there anyway.
So I guess that leads us into Britain's 10 actors, many of whom were in this story.
Yeah. First one I looked up, I'm just gonna say, because the Time Lord at the beginning, You know, you would think such a bit part would be like their most famous role would be Doctor Who. Wrong, you would be wrong. They were the librarian in the 2007 Golden Compass movie, believe it or not. He was also in the 1996 remake of Emma. Is this a remake of Emma? Or is this a completely different Emma? Might be a completely different Emma. Well, I don't care. No, actually, I do think that this is the second movie based on Jane Austen's book, so I guess it's kind of a remake and also kind of not. Whatever. Anyway, he was in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Casualty. Well, I almost said Causality. Whoop, that would have been wrong. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Jim Henson Hour, Lionheart, The Black Tower, BBC Two Playhouse. Man, haven't seen that in a while. ITV Playhouse too. Haven't seen that since we did The Prisoner on Inevitable. Z-Cars, Softly Softly Task Force, a TV show called Woodstock. Basically a whole bunch of other stuff. Ivanhoe. He actually got a pretty like wide-ranging career outside of Doctor Who. The Baron, ITV Play of the Week, The Avengers, all those classic British TV shows.
Yeah, good for him.
That's John Franklin Robbins. I don't think I actually said his name. Whoops.
Well, similarly extensive career here. We have Peter Miles playing Niter. He's been in some pretty well-known things. He was in Softly Softly in the 60s, 1968. He was in Sherlock Holmes, 1968. Which, that might be the American one, actually. I know there was like an old American Sherlock Holmes that I've watched a couple episodes of that. I don't know if it was 1968.
Maybe.
Whatever. Doesn't matter. He was in Detective, 30-Minute Theater, The Doctors. Not Doctors, it's something else called The Doctors. Dixon of Dock Green, Fathers and Sons, the TV miniseries, Crown Court, Then and Now, New Scotland Yard, I don't know what that is. Played multiple roles in Doctor Who. He was Dr. Lawrence in Doctor Who and the Silurians, Professor Whittaker in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, and obviously Niter in this episode. He was in Poldark, Zakars. He's in Blake 7. Played Secretary Rontaine in the episodes Seek, Locate, Destroy, and Trial. I don't remember who Rontaine was, but he played him. Bergerac.
Don't know. A classic.
He's in The Bill in 1993, and it looks like a lot of other things too, and that's it. Oh, he was in Moonbase 3, I'm seeing, in 1973.
Nice.
And then we also have Dennis Chinnery. He played Garmin. He also has a really extensive career, almost 100 roles according to IMDb. Yeah.
Jeez.
You wouldn't have thought, huh? He was in Hancock's Half Hour back in 1956. Looks like a lot of other things here that I'm not familiar with. Plague of the Zombies, that sounds cool. The Man in Room 17. Man, the 16th sequel to The Man in Room. Wow. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
The Queen's Traitor. He played the Earl of Leicester. A word that I find one of the most confounding, like, place names in the English language, because it's spelled as Leicester. It's just pronounced Leicester, I believe,
yep.
Or yeah, something like that. Could probably am wrong. Oh, he was in The Prisoner. Played Gunther in Many Happy Returns.
Nice.
I wonder if he was in Danger Man, because let me just double check here, because like everyone who was in The Prisoner was in Danger Man. It doesn't look like he was.
Oh, devastating.
Man, what were you doing, Patrick McGowan?
What were you doing? Didn't get every actor who had ever been in... didn't have only actors who were in Danger Man on The Prisoner. Like, what are you doing, man?
Exactly. He was in Orlando. He was in the Wreckers at Deadeye Sounds cool. Don't know what it is. He was in Softly Softly Task Force, 30-Minute Theater, Harriet's Back in Town, Zedcars, Crown Court, just Coronation Street, just a lot of other things. Oh, look, he had more roles in Doctor Who. He was, he was Sylvester in The Twin Dilemma Part 1. No, and he was Albert C. Richardson in Flight Through Eternity. What was Flight Through Eternity? I don't remember.
I don't know.
I think that was maybe an episode title, right? Not like a serial title, but back when they titled the individual episodes. I don't remember what. I should probably look at it on the TARDIS wiki, but I don't remember what serial that was from. So I'm just going to look it up for here. Just give me a second. Probably don't even need to go this far, but whatever. It was The Chase. The Flight Through Eternity sounds much more, I don't know, metaphysical than like The Chase was. Yeah, he was in The Bill, Bullseye. Yeah, just a bunch of other things that I didn't mention, so yeah.
Nice. Let's see. I've also got Michael Wisher as Davros. He was in something called the Air Zone Solution. The picture on IMDb is like a really, really crappy Photoshop of like the lead actors' faces over some indeterminate background, and the tagline is an environmental thriller for the 90s.
Yeah, wasn't the Air Zone Solution, wasn't that one of the like quote that definitely not Doctor Who, you know?
Yeah, it's written by Nicholas Briggs. It stars John Pertwee, Peter Davison, and Sylvester McCoy, and Colin Baker. And Nicola Bryant, actually.
Yeah.
But also Michael Wisher. Let's see. Okay, moving on. Yeah, he did a bunch of those weird ones, because he also did Shakedown, Return of the Sontarans. He was on an episode of EastEnders, The Bill, Vanity Fair. He comes back as other characters on Doctor Who. He's Morelli in Planet of Evil, Madrick in Revenge of the Cybermen. He does some Dalek voices in Planet and Death of the Daleks. He's Khalik in Carnival of Monsters, Rex Farrell in Terror of the Autons, John Wakefield in The Ambassadors of Death. He's in Z-Cars, Blue Peter. And that's pretty much it, actually. A substantial amount of his career is Doctor Who-related things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did not know how prolific he was within Doctor Who.
He also played the Cheshire Cat in the 1986 Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, good for him.
So that's that.
Well, we got a couple emails this week. As you normally say, that I'm co-opting this time.
Yeah, I guess. Let's see. So one from Steven, Genesis of the Daleks. Hello, answer me this, TYD. Why don't people talk about the fact that Peter Gabriel left Genesis the same year that Genesis of the Daleks aired? Apparently his last concert with them was in May, a month after the serial finished, and his departure was announced officially sometime afterward. Is it possible that the serial somehow convinced him to leave the band? Cheers, Steven.
No.
Oh. Well, okay, Keon brutally efficient in cutting to the chase, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to make some joke there about like cutting to the serial, the chase.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I mean it's no. It's no. The answer is no. Watch it actually just be like yes, like it actually was.
Yeah, that'd be what. Just on his deathbed, Peter Gabriel's like, that goddamn Doctor Who serial made me quit Genesis. And then we've got another one from Richie. Hey guys, it's Richie again. I just finished Matt Smith's run on the podcast, and as I predicted, Keon now finds Clara his favorite companion. Only time will tell if my full prediction will come true. Which leads me to my own conspiracy that I am actually controlling the outcome of your podcasts and opinions. I must be in a fake reality, right? Or if I was put in a simulation, I have to find where the computers cut corners to make the program run smoothly. Hear me out. The original owner of the company I work at is named Richard B. The new owner of the company is named Richard B. My foreman is named Richard B. And I, of course, am named Richard B. What does this have to do with Doctor Who and you guys? Well, my superintendent is named Tom Baker. The fake simulation is really struggling with storage space. Just a funny coincidence. I don't actually think I'm in a simulation. Keep up the good work. I'll be catching up to real time pretty quickly. Richie, I'm glad you got our message. You need to wake up. You're in a coma. We've been trying to reach you for the past 10 years by injecting things into TV and film and podcast media you've been listening to. You're finally getting the message. You need to wake up, Richie. Your family loves you.
Wow. Well, that's our daily quota of attempting to inject schizophrenia into people's lives.
Thanks for reaching out, Richie and Steven. Always glad to hear from you guys. And yeah, Richie, you're going through the show real fast. You'll be caught up real soon.
Mm-hmm. Just have to make it through that first season of the 12th Doctor. Just that
Series 8.
That bumpy, rocky Danny Pink era.
Yeah. Oof.
We did get one comment on Twitter. I had already read it though at the beginning of the episode. It was the one from Bob Rushy. So
nice.
Already, have that under our belts. So there we go.
Well, on that note, then, I guess we're done. You can email us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Genesis of the Daleks. You can find us on YouTube at Decadent Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you find podcasts at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be watching the Fifth Doctor story, not the Enlightenment, just Enlightenment. But until then, the end.